group of teenagers at the local pool thought they'd found an easy target, a quiet new kid who kept to himself. What they didn't know was that Elijah James wasn't just another face in the crowd. Behind his calm demeanor and polite silence was a lifetime of training, discipline, and strength that none of them were prepared for. It started like any ordinary summer afternoon at Oak Ridge Community Pool. Kids splashing, parents chatting, lifeguards scanning the water. Elijah sat quietly near the edge, his swim trunks dry, his gaze steady. Since moving here, he'd gotten used to being treated like an outsider. A mother pulled her daughter closer when they walked by. A little boy abandoned his ball after seeing Elijah's face, and around him, people created invisible space, careful not to stare, yet always watching. He didn't come here to make a scene. He just needed air, space, a break from the four walls of their cramped apartment and the slur someone had sprayed across their door last week. His mom was working a double shift. He didn't want her to worry, so he said he was heading to the pool. But even here, the weight followed him. Then came the voices, taunting, familiar. Brad Collins, loud, smug, and surrounded by two friends who echoed his every word. "Didn't know they let anyone in here these days," Brad said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Elijah didn't react. His grandfather's lessons ran too deep for that. Breathe steady. Don't feed their fire. They formed a half circle behind him, their tone playful, but laced with something darker. And in the blink of an eye, it escalated. A shove, then a second. And suddenly, Elijah was in the water, pushed, surrounded, and held under. But what they hadn't counted on was that Elijah had spent years in his grandfather's backyard dojo, learning more than just self-defense. Under that calm surface was a fighter trained to remain composed even in chaos. What happened next silenced the entire pool. When Elijah emerged, everything changed. His movements were swift, controlled, and powerful. Panic replaced mockery. One by one, the bullies scrambled, not because they were hurt, but because they were seen for who they really were, and so was he. But just as truth began to surface, new forces stepped in. Brad's family wasn't just wealthy, they were influential, and they wanted this story buried. Now Elijah faces a different kind of challenge, not in the pool, but in the court of public opinion. In a town that protects its own, can one teen's voice break through the silence? Or will the truth be swept away? Before we dive into what happens next, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? And make sure you're subscribed. Tomorrow's story is one you'll feel. Mason Carter stood silently to the right, arms folded like stone pillars, his entire posture radiating menace. He looked like he was just waiting for a reason to act. Brad stepped closer, pretending to sound concerned. "You lost or something?" "This side's for members only. Pool for the public's on the other side of town." Elijah didn't flinch. "I have a membership," he said, voice even, just like his grandfather taught him. "Stay grounded, stay calm." Kyle forced a laugh. "Did you hear that, Brad? Membership? Must have paid for it with pocket change." Mason shifted to block Elijah's way back to his chair, cracking his knuckles as he loomed larger. Brad circled like a predator, pretending to be casual. "You know, some moms said they didn't feel safe with certain people watching their kids. That certain people didn't need explanation." Around them, the other pool goers fell silent. Heads turned away, eyes suddenly focused on phones and towels. The younger lifeguard avoided eye contact, but Mr. Curtis, the elder lifeguard, was watching closely, fingers hovering over his whistle, sensing trouble. "I just came to swim," Elijah said, careful not to back into the water. The pool wasn't his refuge right now. It was a trap. "Oh, we'll help you swim," Brad said loudly, grinning. "Show you the ropes, right, boys?" Kyle and Mason moved in. The three surrounded him now. It looked like teasing to a stranger. But Elijah recognized the rhythm. It was an ambush wearing a smile. Then Brad lunged. Without warning, Elijah was shoved hard, flying backward into the deep end. The water hit him like ice. Before he could surface, a hand pushed him under. Then another. And another. The laughter above turned cruel. The pressure on his head grew as hands forced him down again. Chlorine stung his eyes. His chest screamed for air. But Elijah didn't panic. His grandfather's words rang clear. Water is like wind. Don't fight it. Move with it. Let it carry your strike. They thought they were playing. They weren't. This wasn't a prank. It was a trap. And Elijah knew it. Mason yanked him up just long enough for a quick, desperate breath before Brad shoved him down again. Kyle kicked at the water above, sending waves crashing in every direction. But Elijah wasn't out of options. He was calculating. He went limp for just a second. Mason's grip loosened. Then, boom. Elijah's leg rocketed up from beneath the surface, striking Mason square in the chest. The impact sent the bigger teen stumbling back, gasping as the air shot from his lungs. No one expected it. That was the moment everything shifted. Underwater, Elijah twisted with precision, snatching Kyle's ankle and pulling with practiced force. Kyle dropped like dead weight, splashing hard into the deep end. Brad froze, unsure, but Elijah was already in motion. 8 years of martial arts surged through his body like instinct. With a sweeping motion, Elijah's leg cut underwater, catching Brad behind the knees and sending him crashing backward. The bullies were no longer laughing. The crowd around the pool no longer looked away, and for the first time since moving here, Elijah wasn't invisible. The splash echoed like a warning shot. Brad hit the water hard, his smug grin vanishing beneath waves of panic. He surfaced coughing, arms flailing, his voice no longer full of swagger, but shock. On the far side of the pool, Elijah broke through the surface too, calm, focused, his breath deep and steady as water streamed off his face. The scene had flipped. Just moments ago, they were circling him like predators. Now they were scattered. Mason doubled over near the edge, Kyle splashing wildly in confusion, and Brad scrambling to keep from going under. The tide had turned, and it had turned fast. But Elijah didn't follow up with more force. He didn't need to. His discipline held firm, reminding him this wasn't about revenge. It was about standing his ground, making it clear he wasn't the victim they assumed he'd be. A piercing whistle cut through the air. Mr. Curtis, the senior lifeguard, now fully alert, eyes locked on the scene. The silence that followed was only broken by Brad's ragged voice, laced with disbelief. "What the hell? How did you—" But Elijah had already moved, swimming smoothly to put distance between them. Every motion was fluid, efficient, his training guiding him like muscle memory. Kyle finally touched the shallow floor, still gasping. "He's insane!" he shouted, finger trembling as he pointed. "Did you see that? He tried to drown us!" Mason had managed to help Brad out of the water, but the usual cockiness was gone. What replaced it was hesitation, fear. They had stepped on a landmine and only now realized it. Elijah stayed where he was, centered in the deeper end, ready if they came at him again. But it seemed they weren't ready to test him twice. "You're dead," Brad hissed, chest heaving. "You're gonna regret this." Elijah didn't reply. He didn't need to. That's when the crowd noticed. Kids stopped mid-game, frozen in place. Parents stood up, trying to piece together what they'd just seen. And then came the spin. Derek, one of Brad's friends, sprang up from a lounge chair and pointed at Elijah. He just snapped out of nowhere. They were being nice, trying to include him. Others piled on quickly. He started it. We saw everything. He attacked them for no reason. And just like that, the story began to twist, shaped by louder voices and familiar fears. Elijah's presence in the water was now being painted as dangerous, threatening. Murmurs turned into whispers, whispers into suspicion. Mothers clutched their kids, faces hardened. 2 junior lifeguards rushed over, visibly unsure. One asked, "What's going on here?" Brad didn't miss a beat. "We were being friendly," he croaked. And he lost it. Went crazy. Mason, still rubbing his chest from Elijah's kick, added, "He's making stuff up if he says otherwise." Everyone saw what happened. Kyle jumped in, louder than the rest. "He tried to drown Brad." The pool deck erupted in noise. Judgment was in the air before Elijah even had a chance to speak. The truth was being drowned out, replaced by a more comfortable lie. A lie people wanted to believe, and then another whistle. This one deeper, sharper. The crowd parted instantly as Mr. Curtis stepped forward, calm but firm. "Everyone not involved. Back to your activities," he said. "Now." The juniors stepped aside. The murmuring dimmed. All eyes shifted to the white-haired lifeguard, whose voice held weight earned over decades of watching people try to hide bad behavior under smiles and sunscreen. He scanned the scene carefully. Brad's gang huddled together, Elijah alone, still in the water but standing tall in silence. He noted the red mark on Mason's chest, the tension in the boy's shoulders, the quiet in Elijah's eyes. "Young man," Curtis said, his voice steady, "come on out." Elijah paused, then swam to the far ladder, far from the ones who attacked him, and pulled himself up with quiet strength. He didn't slouch, didn't shrink. He stood tall, water dripping off him in silence, and every person watching had to wonder, had they just seen a threat or a boy who refused to drown? "He attacked us!" Brad shouted again, his voice rising in desperation. But Mr. Curtis raised his hand calmly, and the words died on Brad's tongue. "I saw more than you think," the old lifeguard said evenly, his eyes scanning the group like a seasoned detective. The bullies shifted uncomfortably. Derek opened his mouth to jump in, but Mr. Curtis cut him off with quiet steel. "I didn't ask for your commentary." That was enough. Derek fell silent. Then Mr. Curtis turned to Elijah, lowering his voice so only the boy could hear. "Stay calm, son. I know what really happened." There was something deeper in his gaze. Understanding, yes, but also recognition. To the crowd, Curtis announced, "This will be documented and followed up. For now, the area needs to be cleared." Then, pointedly, to Brad and his crew, "All of you, out, now." The boys hesitated, but the authority in Curtis's tone left no room for protest. Grumbling, glaring, they gathered their belongings and stormed off, throwing sharp glances over their shoulders as if the day had turned against them. Curtis turned back to Elijah and spoke gently. "You, mister, come with me." He placed a steady hand on Elijah's shoulder and guided him away, not just from the crowd, but from the accusations still buzzing through the air. As they walked, Elijah could hear the whispers trailing behind. "Always knew he'd be a problem. Did you see what he did to poor Brad? They let anyone in here now." Curtis's grip tightened slightly. "Don't listen to them," he said under his breath. "Keep walking. Keep your head high." They passed the snack bar, the family changing rooms, and finally reached the staff entrance, beyond the judgmental stares and growing rumors. Behind the pool's maintenance building, Curtis led Elijah to an old wooden bench shaded beneath a canopy of oak trees. It was quiet here. No chlorine in the air, just the smell of bark and summer wind. "Sit," Curtis said, settling beside him. Elijah sat, his body still wet, his heart still heavy. He sat tall, though, just like he was taught. Curtis looked at him with a faint smile. "Those movements in the water. I've seen that style before. You've been trained well." Elijah blinked. "You knew my grandfather?" "I did," Curtis nodded. "Back in '75, before he moved north. He was one of the finest martial artists I ever met, and one of the most principled." Elijah's voice softened. He never mentioned you. He wouldn't have, but I never forgot him. Then Curtis leaned in. But that's not why I brought you here. We need to talk about what comes next. A breeze rustled the leaves above, sending a chill down Elijah's spine. Those boys, Brad Thompson, Kyle Richardson, Mason Peters, their families practically run this town, Curtis said slowly. Brad's dad is the chief of police. Kyle's mom sits on the city council. Mason's parents are both attorneys, and they all play golf with the judge who handles most juvenile cases. Elijah's stomach sank. They're going to spin this, Curtis continued. They'll say you started it. They'll flood the town with their version of events, and they've got friends in all the right places to back it up. The truth? He shook his head. Sometimes the truth doesn't matter here. Elijah clenched his fists. But I didn't do anything wrong. I defended myself. They tried to drown me. I know, Curtis said, and I believe you. But you're not just dealing with bullies. You're dealing with legacy, with fear, with a town that's very good at rewriting stories. Curtis looked out toward the trees, his voice dropping. 20 years ago, a black family had their house vandalized. Police called it a prank. 10 years ago, a student was beaten outside the school. Just a fight, they said. 2 years ago, a black business owner had threats spray painted on his shop. They blamed teenagers. At Elijah's feet, his backpack buzzed. Then again, and again. Curtis sighed. It's already starting. Social media moves faster than the truth. Elijah opened his phone. Dozens of notifications flooded the screen. Texts, tags, DMs. He read the first one. New kid went nuts at the pool. Then another. Psycho attacked Brad. Dude snapped out of nowhere. His chest tightened. The real story, the one that could protect him, was already being buried under lies. The messages kept pouring in. He tried to kill Kyle and Mason. Watch out for the violent new kid. Each notification hit harder than the last. A carefully edited video had already made its way online, conveniently starting after Elijah was shoved into the water. Out of context, it looked like he had started everything. The comments section exploded with blame. He should be arrested. Knew he'd caused trouble. Keep him away from our pool. Photos appeared. Brad, Kyle, and Mason looking distraught, as if they'd barely survived. Elijah knew the truth. They hadn't even been hurt. But that didn't matter. Their friends were resharing the images, adding fake stories. I was there. He just snapped. They were trying to be nice. Then came the worst one. This is what happens when you let people like that into our neighborhood. Elijah's hands trembled. Every buzz of his phone felt like another weight crushing his chest. The truth wasn't just being ignored, it was being rewritten. They're framing me, he whispered, staring at the screen. They're turning me into something I'm not. Mister. Curtis rested a firm hand on his shoulder. That's how it works here, he said quietly. But you're not alone in this. More alerts, more lies, more venom. Elijah's world was crumbling in real time, all because he stood up for himself. Then a new message appeared, from Brad. You're dead meat now, boy. No one's gonna believe you over us. Welcome to Oak Ridge. Later that evening, Elijah sat at the kitchen table, shoulders hunched, silent tears falling as his mom, Denise, held him close. Her diner uniform was still on. She hadn't even had time to change. I didn't start it, Mom, he managed through shallow breaths. They tried to drown me. I just did what Grandpa taught me. She stroked his back gently. I know, baby. You did what you had to do. The kitchen was small and lived in, dishes still in the sink, the fridge humming loud. Normally, the little space felt warm, safe, but now it was closing in. They're calling me a thug online, Elijah said. They're lying, saying I attacked them for no reason. Denise pulled back slightly, her voice steady even through the exhaustion. Let them talk. You know who you are. You're your grandfather's grandson, disciplined, honorable, strong. Elijah looked at her, really looked. Despite the fatigue in her face, her eyes burned with fire. That same fire had gotten them through every struggle. Every door slammed in their face. Every shift she worked twice just to keep them going. "What are we going to do?" he asked, barely above a whisper. "Mr. Curtis said their families basically run the whole town." Denise nodded slowly. "Then we do what we always do. We fight, together." She reached for her phone. "Let me call Sharon. She works at a law office. Maybe she..." But she didn't finish. Red and blue lights washed over the room, flashing through the windows like a warning siren. A sharp burst of sirens echoed outside. Then silence, just the rotating lights casting colors across the walls. Elijah's heart raced. "Stay calm," Denise said, standing up, even though her voice wavered. She straightened her apron, trying to steady herself. "Remember what Grandpa always said, stay focused." Heavy footsteps on the porch. A loud knock rattled the door. "Police! Open up!" Denise squeezed Elijah's shoulder and walked to the door. 3 officers stood outside, hands resting near their belts. The lead one spoke. "Mrs. James, I'm Officer Peterson. We're here regarding an assault complaint filed against your son." Denise froze. "Assault? My son was the one attacked. Those boys tried to drown him." Peterson's face remained flat. "That's not what the witnesses are saying. We have multiple statements claiming your son assaulted 3 minors without provocation." "That's a lie," Elijah said, stepping forward. "They shoved me in, held me under. I couldn't breathe." "Watch your tone, son," one officer said sharply, stepping closer. "There's video. It shows you attacking those boys." "That video's edited," Elijah cried. "It doesn't show what they did first." Denise raised her voice, trembling with rage. "They could have killed my son, and you're standing here threatening him?" Officer Peterson's tone turned ice cold. "Mrs. James, I suggest you and your son cooperate. We can do this the easy way." Denise's voice didn't shake this time. "Are you threatening us?" Peterson's eyes narrowed. "One more word about race and we can add obstruction to the list." Elijah felt his mother's grip on his arm, gentle but firm, a silent reminder, stay calm. His grandfather's voice echoed in his head. "If you don't control your emotions, they'll be used against you." Officer Peterson didn't flinch. "Here's your court summons," he said, shoving a folded paper into Denise's hands. "Juvenile court. Tuesday, 9 a.m. If your son's not there, we'll come back with an arrest warrant." Denise's hand trembled as she took the paper, but her voice remained steady. "We'll be there, and we'll be filing a formal complaint. Those boys tried to drown my son." Peterson let out a cold laugh. "Good luck with that. I'm sure Chief Thompson will be very interested in your version of things." Then, almost as an afterthought, he turned back. "Word of advice, keep your son in line. Wouldn't want another incident." The 3 officers returned to their cruiser, lights still flashing, then suddenly off. The darkness that followed felt heavier than silence. Elijah and his mother stood frozen in the doorway as the patrol car disappeared into the morning. Denise slowly closed the door, then leaned against it, her strength breaking. The mask slipped, tears spilled. "Oh, baby." Elijah caught her in his arms as she collapsed into him, her body shaking. The summons slipped from her hand, falling to the floor. An official seal, a date, a threat wrapped in bureaucracy, and all Elijah could think was, "They've already decided I'm guilty. What are they going to do to me?" he whispered. Denise stepped back and wiped her tears. "They're trying to scare us, but we are not going to let them win." Her words were strong, but behind her eyes, he saw the same thing he felt, fear. because they both knew what could happen when a black teenager enters a courtroom alone. Later that morning, sunlight poured through Elijah's bedroom window, but the brightness felt wrong. Elijah? His mother's voice cut through the house, tight, urgent. Baby, come here, quick. He rushed out barefoot, heart pounding. The moment he entered the living room, he saw it. Glass everywhere. The large front window had been shattered. Only jagged edges remained in the frame. The breeze pushed through what used to be solid, making the curtains flutter like warning flags. Mom? I'm out here. He found her in the driveway. She wasn't crying this time. Her arms were crossed, her jaw tight, but her voice shook from the weight of rage she was holding in. Elijah followed her gaze, spray-painted in bright red, across the garage door. Go home. Several stones, still slick with dew, lay nearby, the same ones used to shatter their window. I already called the police, Denise said. Not that they'll do anything. Elijah reached out and touched the letters. His fingers came away wet, stained red. It looked like blood. This is because of yesterday, because I didn't let them drown me. No, Denise said. This is because they're cowards. They come at night because they're afraid of truth in daylight. A car passed by slowly. The driver stared, then sped up when Elijah met their gaze. Word would spread quickly in Oak Ridge. Probably already had. We should clean this before more people see, Elijah muttered, trying to keep his voice steady. No. Denise pulled out her phone and started taking photos. Let them see, let everyone see what this town protects. Elijah turned toward the broken window, the rocks, the slurs. This wasn't random. This wasn't a prank. This was a message. Stay silent, or this gets worse. Another car pulled into the driveway, but this time it wasn't the police. It was Mr. Curtis. He stepped out of his truck and looked around in silence, taking in the damage, the broken glass, the hate-filled words, the fear still lingering in the air. I heard what happened, he said softly. Neighbors saw a car here late last night. Too dark to see who it was, but we can guess. Denise exhaled with relief. You didn't have to come. Yes, I did. He looked Elijah in the eye. This is what they do. First they try to drown a boy, and when that doesn't work, they try to drown the truth. Then they try to break your spirit. Elijah felt those words settle in his chest like stone. Mr. Curtis wasn't guessing. He was remembering. You could see it in his eyes. He'd lived through this before. Denise glanced down at her phone. The police said they're on their way, she muttered, though I doubt it'll mean anything. They'll log it, take a few photos, call it property damage, Curtis added. Just like they called the pool attack a misunderstanding. This system works exactly the way it was built to. Then he turned to Elijah, his gaze steady. How are you holding up, son? Elijah opened his mouth to say, I'm fine, but stopped. His grandfather had always warned him, never lie to yourself. I'm scared, he said, and angry, and I don't know what to do with any of it. Mr. Curtis nodded. Fear and anger are like fire. They'll either consume you or forge you. It depends on how you use them. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. I've got a gym behind my house, not flashy, but it's where your grandfather used to train with me back in the day. He called it our sanctuary. You're welcome there, anytime. You want to train me? Elijah asked, blinking in surprise. Mr. Curtis shook his head. I want to give you space to breathe, a place to channel what you're carrying, to focus. Your grandfather would have wanted that. Denise gently touched Elijah's arm. Might be good for you, baby. You always said training helped you think clearer. Mr. Curtis offered the keys. Early mornings, late nights, whatever you need. Just better than sitting here waiting for the next rock to come through your window. Elijah took the keys, feeling their weight. His grandfather had said it often. Martial arts wasn't about the fight. It was about staying balanced when the world tries to knock you over. "Thank you," he whispered. Mr. Curtis smiled slightly. "Don't thank me yet. Wait until you see how we trained in Nam. Most dojos today don't teach that kind of discipline." At that moment, a patrol car turned down the street. Slow, deliberate. Elijah's gut tightened. It was Officer Peterson again. He stepped out like he already knew what he'd find. No questions, no surprise, just another report to file and forget. Later that day, as the summer heat thickened, Elijah walked his bike up a gravel driveway, the tires crunching underfoot. Mr. Curtis's house sat back from the road, shaded by towering oaks. Behind it, tucked out of sight, stood a weathered old building with a wide wooden door. It looked like it hadn't changed in 50 years. Mr. Curtis was already outside. Black pants, a faded army tee, hands behind his back. "Your grandfather helped me convert this place in '75, he said, unlocking the door. "Every fighter needs a sanctuary." Inside, the air was cool and still. Sunlight streamed in through high windows, casting golden stripes across a worn wooden floor. Heavy bags, speed bags, scarred wooden dummies. The scent of old leather and faint incense filled the air. Elijah stood in the center of it all, breathing it in. "This place is incredible." "In here," Curtis said. "The noise of the world fades. In here you build." He thought so too. He motioned to a small shrine in the corner, photographs, medals, a candle that had long since melted down. "That's us, Mr. Curtis said, pointing to a black and white photo of two young soldiers, arms over each other's shoulders. "Your grandfather saved my life in a firefight outside Da Nang." Elijah stepped closer, staring at his grandfather's younger face. Even then, same steady gaze, same quiet resolve. "Let's warm up," Curtis said. "Let's see what you remember." They started simple: stances, blocks, movement. Mr. Curtis corrected quietly, without judgment. "Good power," he said, watching Elijah work a combination. "But you're telegraphing. That half-second delay, it's all it takes to lose a fight." Together they worked on precision, on speed, on calm. Between drills, Mr. Curtis shared stories, little moments from the past that added color to the man Elijah had only known in quiet mornings and old photo albums. He never panicked, Curtis said as they shifted to footwork. Even under fire, panic was something he said we couldn't afford. He meant it. By the end of the session, Elijah's shirt was soaked through, his arms aching. But something inside him felt lighter, not just stronger, clearer. Like for the first time in days, the fire inside him had somewhere to go. Mr. Curtis may have been nearly 70, but his movements were still sharp, efficient, lethal in their simplicity. During a water break, he looked over at Elijah, sweat glistening on both their brows. "Those boys at the pool," he said, "they attacked you because they thought silence meant weakness, but they have no idea what real strength is." Elijah wiped his face with a towel. "What do you mean?" "They confuse cruelty with power," Mr. Curtis replied. "They think hurting someone makes them strong. But your grandfather knew better. Strength, real strength, is having the control to protect yourself and others, without ever needing to humiliate someone to prove it." They moved into grappling. Mr. Curtis demonstrated each move with calm precision, showing Elijah how to break holds, slip out of chokeholds, control leverage. "These were your grandfather's favorites," he said. "Didn't matter how big the other guy was. He always said, leverage beats size and timing beats muscle." As the sun dipped lower, they kept working. In between drills, Curtis shared stories, from the jungles of Vietnam to street protests in the 60s to teaching martial arts to kids who'd been turned away from every other dojo in town. Your grandfather never went looking for a fight, Curtis said, as Elijah delivered a rapid combo to the heavy bag, but he never ran from one either. By the end of the session, Elijah's arms burned and his knuckles were sore, but something inside him had quieted. He felt focused again, strong not just in body, but in spirit. Same time tomorrow? Curtis asked, helping him wrap an ice pack. Yes, sir. Elijah nodded. Thank you for everything. Don't thank me yet, Curtis said with a faint grin. Tomorrow, we start the hard stuff. Elijah smiled, stepping into the cool evening air. He felt different, steadier, more like himself again. That feeling lasted right up until he reached his bike, chained outside the fence. A note had been slipped through the spokes, folded, clean, precise. He unfolded it and read the message typed in bold black letters. Get out of town, or what happened to your house will feel like a warm welcome. The next morning, the school hallway felt longer than usual. Each step echoed louder. Every glance felt sharper. As Elijah passed, students went silent. Conversations died mid-sentence. Eyes shifted away when he met their gaze. That's him, someone whispered. The one from the pool. Another voice added, I heard he knows, like, combat or something. Total freak. He kept walking, shoulders back, chin high. Your grandfather walked through worse, Mr. Curtis had told him earlier that morning. Keep your dignity. Let them see your calm, not your fear. At his locker, Elijah's fingers trembled as he spun the lock. A group of girls nearby grabbed their bags and hurried off, throwing nervous glances over their shoulders. And then came the sound. Footsteps, heavy, confident. Brad's voice followed. Well, look who it is. The little kung fu hero. Elijah turned slowly, his back to the lockers, his eyes steady. Brad, Kyle, and Mason stood in a half circle around him. Brad's eye was still bruised from the pool. Mason walked with a slight limp. Their pride was more wounded than their bodies, and now they wanted payback. I'm not here to fight, Elijah said calmly. He could hear his grandfather in his mind. Avoid conflict. Words first. Fists only when there's no other way. Kyle slammed his palm against the locker right next to Elijah's head. The bang echoed down the hallway. Too late, Kyle hissed. You already made us look weak. Mason stepped forward, rage in his voice. Nobody does that, and walks away. Elijah's body tensed. He could feel the energy coiling, the techniques from the gym still alive in his muscles. He could take them. He wanted to take them, but he knew that was exactly what they were hoping for. One move, Mr. Curtis had warned, and they'll twist it. They'll say you started it, that you were the threat. Brad leaned in, breath hot and sour. Your little karate tricks won't save you here. You think anyone's gonna believe you over us? Kyle smirked. My dad's the principal's golf buddy, Mason added, and mine's on the school board. One phone call, and you're gone. Elijah's hands clenched at his sides. The rage boiled, but he didn't let it control him. He met Brad's eyes. Back, off. Brad didn't. He grabbed Elijah's shirt and slammed him into the locker. You think you're tough? Prove it. And for a heartbeat, everything stopped. Let's see those moves now, with witnesses around. Brad's voice was loud, calculated. Elijah glanced around. A few students had stopped. Phones were out, cameras up. That's when it hit him. They wanted an audience. They weren't just here to intimidate him. They were here to bait him, to finish what they'd started at the pool. But on camera this time. Just as the tension peaked, a sharp voice rang out. What's going on here, Mrs. Henderson's heels clicked hard against the tile as she strode down the hallway. Elijah felt Brad's grip vanish instantly. The boys scattered just enough to look innocent. Nothing, Mrs. Henderson, Brad said, his voice syrupy. Just chatting. He was threatening us again. Kyle added, his tone wounded. Like at the pool. Elijah straightened his shirt. He kept his voice calm. That's not true. They surrounded me. Enough. Her voice cut him off like a blade. She looked at him, really looked, and Elijah saw it in her eyes. She'd already made up her mind. I've heard about the pool incident, she said coldly, and I've heard about your martial arts background. The way she said it made it sound like a crime, like knowing how to defend himself made him dangerous by default. Mrs. Henderson, they're lying. They tried to. I said enough. She folded her arms, fixing him with a hard stare. This is a peaceful school, Mr. James. We do not tolerate violence or threats. If you want to remain enrolled, I suggest you start thinking very carefully about your actions. Behind her, the three bullies smirked. Brad even made a small slicing motion across his throat, just out of her view. Do you understand me? Elijah's jaw clenched. Every instinct screamed to speak, to fight back. But what was the point? Her mind was already made up. Yes, ma'am, he said, his voice quiet but steady. Good. Now get to class. All of you. As the three boys strutted away, she turned back to Elijah. One wrong move, she said, and you'll regret it. And then she was gone, leaving Elijah alone in the hallway, the bell's shrill ring matching the static in his head. He stood still, breathing deep, his reflection fractured in the dented locker door. Rage simmered inside him, but he held the line. That evening, fists flew with controlled fury. Elijah pounded the heavy bag in Mr. Curtis's small backyard dojo, the walls echoing with every strike. Sweat soaked his shirt. His breathing came sharp. Harder, Mr. Curtis called out. But control your breathing. Don't let anger take your aim. Elijah missed a punch. It skimmed past the center of the bag. He stepped back, wiping his forehead, fists still trembling. They set me up, he said, made it look like I was the threat. Mr. Curtis didn't flinch. He walked over and adjusted Elijah's stance. Your grandfather faced the same playbook. When those in power feel threatened, they don't fight fair. They twist truth. That's how they keep control. How did he deal with it? Same way you will. Mr. Curtis nodded once, with discipline. He motioned for Elijah to follow him to the center mat. The dojo was quiet, grounded. One photo hung by the door, two young men in martial arts uniforms, shoulder to shoulder. That's us, Mr. Curtis said, pointing to the picture. Your grandfather saved my life more than once, but the real battles were after we came home. He stepped into a smooth, fluid motion, half strike, half redirection. Your enemies think anger is strength, he said. But anger, when left wild, will betray you. It'll blind you. Control it, and it becomes something else. Focus. Elijah mirrored the motion, slowly. But how do I not be angry? He asked. They're trying to ruin my life. I didn't say don't be angry, Curtis said, correcting Elijah's elbow. I said don't let anger control you. Make it yours. Turn it into precision. They practiced again and again. The technique was advanced, defensive moves that flowed into counterattacks. Elijah moved smoother with every repetition. He felt his thoughts clearing, his breathing steady. It wasn't about rage anymore. It was about resolve. Your grandfather called this the silent form, Mr. Curtis said. It saved his life in combat, but it saved his mind back here. How? Elijah asked. Because out there, Mr. Curtis said, pointing toward the world beyond the walls. They'll try to break your body. When that fails, they'll try to break your spirit. Elijah nodded, breathing deep. So how do I win? By refusing to break, Mr. Curtis said simply. By staying calm when they expect chaos. By staying smart when they want you reckless. They trained for another hour. Each move became sharper, each breath deeper. As the session ended, Elijah bowed. "Thank you, Mr. Curtis." Curtis returned the bow, his face proud but firm. "Don't thank me. Prove them wrong. With your mind, not your fists." And as Elijah left that night, the weight of the day still clinging to his shoulders, he knew one thing: they wanted him to break. But he was learning to bend instead. "Now go home," Mr. Curtis had said. "Your mother's probably waiting with dinner." Elijah pedaled back through the quiet streets of their neighborhood, streetlights casting warm circles on cracked pavement. As he stepped inside, the scent of spicy jambalaya wrapped around him like a hug from the past. "Perfect timing," Denise smiled from the stove. "Set the table." Even after a double shift at the hospital, she'd still made his favorite dish. Elijah grabbed the plates, noticing the fatigue in her movements, but also the pride in her eyes. They sat down together, a rare moment of peace. The food was rich, comforting. For the first time in days, it felt like the storm had paused. "How was training?" she asked. "Good," Elijah said, between bites. "He's teaching me stuff Grandpa used to do. It's different, but it feels right." "Your grandfather would be proud of how you're handling this," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "I know I am. Even with all the trouble You didn't cause anything. You're defending yourself. That's not trouble. It's courage." Her voice was calm but unshakable. "We're not leaving, Elijah. This is our home." And in her words, Elijah felt grounded again. Not just safe, but seen. They talked about school, joked about hospital stories, even made tentative weekend plans. For a few minutes, life felt normal again, until headlights lit up the living room wall. Elijah turned. A car was idling just outside their house. It lingered, just long enough to send a message, then peeled away with a low growl. Denise's hand paused over her fork. "Would you like seconds, baby?" "Yes, please," Elijah said, matching her tone, but inside, his chest was tight. The piece had cracked, but they refused to let it break. Later that night, Elijah sat at his desk, staring at his open textbook. He hadn't read a single word. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Meet at the pool, 9 p.m. Just talking. No more fighting. Time to end this before it gets worse." He stared at the message. His instincts screamed no. Mr. Curtis's voice echoed in his head. "They'll try to isolate you. Don't fall for it." But something else stirred in him, his grandfather's voice. "Sometimes you don't get to wait for justice. Sometimes you have to meet it head on." He changed. Black jeans, dark hoodie, running shoes with grip. In the mirror, his reflection looked older, tougher. He didn't look like a boy anymore. The walk to Oak Ridge Community Pool was quiet. Too quiet. His phone buzzed again. "You coming? We're waiting to talk." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. His breath slowed. His eyes scanned every shadow. Every sound registered. The wind, distant barking, a twig snapping. The pool was closed. The gate locked. The surface of the water shimmered under the quarter moon like glass. Silent. Still. But he wasn't alone. A metallic clank. Whispers. Then silence. "Hey," Brad's voice. "Over here. Just want to talk." Elijah stayed in the shadows. He didn't move in. Not yet. "Come on, man." Brad stepped into view, arms raised. "This has gone too far. Let's just work it out." In the dim light, his face looked sincere. But Elijah had learned to see what most people missed. The tight corners of Brad's mouth. The way his fingers curled when he thought no one was watching. The flicker in his eyes that didn't match his words. "Why here?" Elijah asked, staying back. "Why at night?" "Neutral ground," Brad shrugged. "No teachers, no parents, just us." That's when Elijah saw it. Movement. To the left, near the shed. Kyle. Then Mason, trying to look casual, spreading out, cutting off his exits. They thought they were playing chess, but Elijah wasn't a pawn. He was already calculating his next move. "You're lying," Elijah said calmly, eyes locked on Brad. His muscles didn't twitch, but every nerve was ready. Years of training had taught him that the moment before the strike was always the most dangerous. Brad's smirk evaporated. "Maybe, but you still came, didn't you?" "I had to see if you could fall any lower," Elijah replied, tone sharp, eyes tracking Kyle and Mason without turning his head. "Big words," Brad snapped, stepping back to grab something hidden behind the shed, a metal pipe. Kyle let a chain slide between his fingers with a chilling rattle. Mason already had his pipe gripped tight. "You embarrassed us, made us look weak." Elijah shifted, centering his weight. "You did that to yourselves. Cowards always reveal themselves when the numbers are in their favor." Brad's face twisted. "Get him!" they charged. Metal glinting. Footsteps thundered. Rage in their eyes. But Elijah didn't move. Not yet. His grandfather's words whispered in his mind. "Let them come. Their anger makes them predictable." Brad swung first. The pipe sliced the air where Elijah's head had been, but he wasn't there. He flowed sideways, just out of reach, letting the swing carry Brad's momentum wide. Mason lunged. Elijah dipped low, spun out of the trap. 3 attackers, 1 fighter, but the math didn't scare him because their fury made them slow, sloppy, blind. Kyle whipped the chain, a wide arc. Elijah stepped inside the curve, caught it midair, yanked hard. Kyle stumbled forward. In one clean motion, Elijah wrapped the chain around his wrist and pulled him down with a thud. Kyle's face smacked concrete. Metal clattered free. Mason came in screaming, pipe overhead. Elijah pivoted, low and fast. His legs swept under Mason's feet, clean and surgical. Mason hit the ground hard. The wind left his chest in a desperate gasp. "You're dead!" Brad shouted. He swung wildly. Elijah caught the pipe in both hands, stopping it cold. The force rippled through his arms, but he held. Brad's eyes widened. "No," Elijah said, quiet as a blade. "I'm trained." With one twist, he disarmed Brad. Then, crack, a sidekick to the knee, precise, controlled. Brad cried out, stumbling backward. Kyle got up, nose bloody, swinging fists. Elijah blocked, clean, calm. Each punch redirected, neutralized, absorbed. Kyle overreached. Elijah caught his arm, stepped in, and flipped him hard over his hip. Kyle hit the ground with a heavy grunt. Mason still wheezed, motionless. "Stay down," Elijah warned, voice like iron. "It's over." But Brad didn't listen. He came barreling forward, rage twisting his face, screaming something incoherent. Elijah sidestepped, caught the momentum, and redirected it. Splash. Brad hit the pool, water erupting in every direction. Kyle and Mason tried to crawl away, but Elijah moved faster. He grabbed them both by the collars, one in each fist, dragging them to the edge. "Remember the pool?" he said, voice low and cutting. "Remember laughing while I fought for air?" "Please," Mason gasped. Elijah hurled them into the deep end. They surfaced coughing, flailing. Now they knew fear. Real fear. Brad clung to the edge, sputtering. Elijah stood over them. "How does it feel?" he asked. "To be helpless? To be afraid?" Silence. No more bravado. No more power. Just wet, shivering bodies huddled by the pool wall. Their weapons lay scattered and forgotten on the pavement. Elijah picked each one up. A pipe. A chain. The weight was familiar now, but he didn't keep them. He tossed them into the bushes, far from reach. "Get out!" His voice was final. "Go home, and if you ever come near me again—" "We won't!" Brad cried. "We swear!" Kyle echoed. Elijah said nothing more. He watched them climb out, soaked and defeated, limping into the dark. No longer threats, just shadows slinking back into the night. And then, a sound, soft, behind the fence. Elijah turned sharply, hands ready, but no one attacked. Instead, he saw phones being quickly lowered, faces ducking out of sight, and a whisper through the darkness. "Did you get it all?" Every second, a hushed voice from the shadows. "Holy, that was amazing. They'll never live this down." Elijah turned, trying to catch a glimpse of the voices, but the witnesses, whoever they were, melted into the night like smoke, taking with them the footage that would change everything. He stood alone by the pool, breath steady, heart slowing. The air was still now, the water calm. What once threatened to drown him now only reflected the moonlight. His grandfather would have been proud. He didn't fight out of anger. He fought with control, with clarity, with purpose, and he won. By morning, Elijah barely touched his food. His body ached from the fight, but he hid the limp. Across the table, his mother sat silent, dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't slept. Neither had he. Outside the kitchen window, the red "Go Home" still screamed across their garage door. The cardboard taped over the shattered glass filtered the morning sun into soft, broken lines. A sharp knock jolted them both. Denise flinched, coffee spilling, before they could even stand. "It's Curtis," the voice called. "You need to see this." Elijah opened the door. Mr. Curtis stepped in, his face lit with something rare, hope. "Turn on the news," he said, nearly tripping over himself as he pulled a tablet from under his arm. "It's everywhere." Denise switched on the small TV, but Curtis waved her off. No, watch this first." He placed the tablet on the table. The screen lit up, grainy night footage by the pool. 3 boys approaching, metal glinting in their hands. Elijah alone, calm, then chaos, then skill, then resolution. "Someone filmed everything?" Denise asked, her voice cracking. "Not just one. Multiple angles," Curtis grinned. "And listen." They leaned closer. Every threat, every swing, every plea for mercy was captured in perfect detail. Elijah's defense was clean, controlled, undeniable. "It went viral overnight," Curtis explained. "First TikTok, then Twitter, now it's all over national news." He tapped the screen. 2.1 million views. Then 2.3. The numbers were climbing by the second. Comments poured in. "This kid is a hero." They tried to jump him. He handled it like a master. This is what restraint looks like. Then Mr. Curtis pulled up another video. The pool incident. The original one. Elijah being dragged under the water, clawing to breathe, the laughter, the cruelty, spliced side by side with last night's footage. The full picture. Denise's hands covered her mouth, her eyes welled with tears. This changes everything. Suddenly the TV blared. A breaking news alert. A reporter stood outside their local police station. Allegations of racial bias and mishandling in the Elijah James case. Overnight footage appears to confirm he was not the aggressor, but the repeated victim of targeted attacks. Mr. Curtis tapped again. The police chief was on camera, trying to spin a narrative. "Damage control," Curtis muttered, "but it's too late. The story's out." Elijah's phone buzzed nonstop. Messages, comments, DMs, support from across the country. Interview requests, voices rising in solidarity. Curtis pointed to a comment thread. "People from this town are coming forward," he said. "Stories from 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's all breaking open now." Denise choked back a sob. They can't cover it up anymore. Outside, a news van pulled up. A reporter and cameraman stepped out, already heading for the door. 2 more vans followed. Cars with out-of-state plates lined the street. Mr. Curtis's voice grew quiet. "It's going to get loud. Be ready. But this is truth, and they can't run from it." Elijah's phone rang. Denise answered, put it on speaker. "This is your attorney." The DA's office just dropped every charge. She exhaled in disbelief. They're opening an investigation into the police department instead. The footage changed everything. More vehicles arrived, more cameras, more journalists. Denise peeked through the curtain, then turned back, tears now streaming freely. "Come here, baby," she whispered. Elijah stood, and she pulled him close, arms wrapped tight around his shoulders. Her sobs were deep, filled with relief, not fear. "It's over," he whispered. "They can't hurt us anymore." Curtis wiped his eyes, silent for a beat. Then he spoke. "Your grandfather would have been proud, son. You faced them with honor. You never backed down. And now the world knows who you are." Outside, cameras flashed. Inside, Elijah stood tall, not as a victim, but as a young man who turned fear into strength, injustice into proof, pain into purpose. And for the first time in a long time, the truth stood louder than the lies. Denise gently cupped Elijah's face in her hands. Her voice was soft but unshakable. "My brave, beautiful boy, we made it through." The steps of the courthouse were overflowing, reporters, cameras, microphones jabbing forward like bayonets. The late afternoon sun turned every lens into a spotlight. Elijah climbed the stairs, flanked by his mother and Mr. Curtis, his family, blood and bond. "Elijah, were you targeted for weeks? Did the police ignore your complaints? Can you show us the self-defense moves?" Elijah didn't answer. His eyes stayed forward, chin lifted, just as Mr. Curtis had advised. At the doors, their lawyer met them. Her briefcase looked like it weighed as much as the truth she carried. "Inside's a war zone," she whispered. "Prosecutors pushing for everything. Police chiefs here. All three families brought lawyers. They're coming for you." In the courtroom, Elijah's stomach twisted. Brad, Kyle, and Mason sat in the front row, pressed shirts, polished shoes, fake innocence. But Elijah saw through it. Kyle's arm was in a sling. Brad's bruises hadn't fully healed. Mason looked down when Elijah's eyes met his. Their parents, cold stares, like masks. Brad's father, the town's top real estate developer, leaned toward the prosecutor and muttered something. The police chief, sitting behind him, gave a tight nod, his badge catching the overhead light. "All rise." Judge Martinez entered, her expression unreadable, but her eyes sharp. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but outside they were pressed against the windows like vultures. "Be seated," the judge said. "We're here for case JV 22714, the matter of Elijah James." The prosecutor stood. His voice was steady. His agenda wasn't. "Your Honor, the state will show this juvenile defendant exhibits a dangerous pattern of aggression, culminating in a calculated assault on 3 other students. These were upstanding boys, cornered and attacked." "Objection," Elijah's lawyer said, rising. "They're introducing new claims without notice." "Overruled," the judge said, eyes never leaving the prosecutor. "But tread carefully, Mr. Collins." He smiled thinly. "We'll show the defendant's advanced martial arts training makes him a threat to the community, that he used it to deliberately injure 3 classmates who were trying to talk peacefully. Then, Your Honor." A voice cut through the room like thunder. From the back, Mr. Curtis stood. Something clenched in his hand. "If I may be heard." The judge frowned. "Sir, this is highly irregular. Who are you?" "Curtis Bell," he said, stepping forward. "Former Marine, retired instructor, and a first-hand witness to the ongoing harassment of Elijah James." The room buzzed. "Your Honor, this is improper," the prosecutor began. "I have evidence," Curtis continued, holding up a small USB drive. "Footage, multiple angles, from both incidents, the first assault and last night's ambush." Parents in the gallery shifted. The police chief's jaw tightened. Judge Martinez stared at Mr. Curtis. "Approach." Curtis walked forward, slow and deliberate, his boots clicking across the floor. He handed the drive to the bailiff. The judge inserted it into her monitor. "Your Honor, this should be excluded." "I know procedure, Mr. Collins," she snapped. "But if these allegations are credible, the court will not ignore them." The lights dimmed. A screen lowered from the ceiling. The projector flickered to life. The pool incident played first. Brad, Kyle, Mason, shoving Elijah under the water, laughing, holding him down. The sound of Elijah gasping, clawing, desperate for air filled the courtroom. "Turn it off!" Mr. Peterson roared, jumping to his feet. "That footage is doctored! Sit down!" The judge's voice turned to steel. "Bailiff, remove any further interruptions." The video played on. Then came the second clip. Last night, 3 boys, pipes, chains, approaching one unarmed figure. The audio cut like a knife. "Time to learn your place, boy. Should have left town when we warned you. Nobody's going to believe you anyway." Mrs. Mason buried her face in her hands. Kyle looked away. Brad didn't move at all. The attacks, the failed ambush, Elijah's restraint, precision, honor, and then a third clip, a new angle, same day, same pool. Brad whispering to his friends, "My dad says these people need to know their place. Nobody can touch us in this town." The courtroom went silent. Elijah sat frozen. Denise gripped his hand. Mr. Curtis stood like a statue behind them. The prosecutor looked pale. Judge Martinez slowly turned from the screen to the courtroom. And for the first time since Elijah walked into that building, the truth stood louder than the lies. Silence gripped the courtroom. The screen went black. The only sound was the quiet hum of the projector winding down. Judge Martinez took off her glasses with slow precision. "Mr. Collins," she said, voice low but firm, "do you still wish to proceed with the state's case?" The prosecutor hesitated, fingers tugging at his collar. "Your Honor, perhaps a brief recess to review the new material." Before the judge could respond, a voice rose from the back. "Your Honor." A tall man in an FBI windbreaker stood up, badge in hand. "The Bureau requests that all footage be preserved. We're launching an investigation into possible civil rights violations and obstruction of justice." The room shifted. The police chief paled. The families of the accused whispered furiously to their attorneys. Judge Martinez picked up her gavel. Crack. "This hearing is dismissed, with prejudice." The courtroom exploded into motion. "All charges against Elijah James are dropped immediately," the judge continued, her voice rising over the noise. "And I am ordering an investigation into the conduct of every party involved in this attempted miscarriage of justice." Cheers erupted. Neighbors stood. Parents applauded. Denise pulled Elijah into a fierce hug, her tears falling freely. Mr. Curtis laid a steady hand on Elijah's shoulder. His nod said everything. Proud, relieved, vindicated. "Order." "Order in the court," the judge snapped. The gavel struck again. "I'm not finished." The room hushed. "Based on the evidence, I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges against Bradley Peterson, Kyle Richardson, Mason Thompson, and their parents for conspiracy, filing false reports, and child endangerment. Gasps, protests, outrage. Mr. Peterson shot to his feet. "You can't do this. Do you know who I am?" "Bailiff," the judge said coldly. "Remove Mr. Peterson." 2 FBI agents flanked the police chief as he sat slumped in his chair. More agents moved to secure the exits. There would be no more escaping accountability. Suddenly, a voice from the gallery. "I knew they were lying." It was Mrs. Thompson from the PTA. "Elijah helped my father with groceries every week." Another added, "He tutors my daughter in math. Always polite, always kind." More voices followed. Witnesses who had once been silent now spoke freely. Neighbors, teachers, parents. My son saw them spray painting the garage. They've been bullying kids for years. We complained. No one listened. The prosecutor packed his papers silently, but an FBI agent approached, badge extended. We'll need your files. Every case involving these families. Elijah's lawyer beamed, turning to Mr. Curtis. That footage, how did you get it? Curtis gave a small smile. Sometimes justice needs a little help, and sometimes teenagers with phones are braver than adults with authority. At the back of the courtroom, a group of students stood up. We filmed it, one girl said. We were scared before, but we couldn't stay quiet and let it happen again. Judge Martinez looked out over the room. Her voice softened. Mr. James, she said. Elijah stood. This court owes you an apology. No young man should face what you've endured. Not in this town, not anywhere. Thank you, Your Honor. His voice didn't waver. Mrs. James, the judge continued, you've raised a son with restraint, discipline, and integrity. You should be proud. Denise wiped her eyes. His grandfather taught him well, strength with control, power with purpose. As the courtroom emptied, neighbors shook Elijah's hand. Some brought casseroles. Some simply said, We're sorry. Brad, Kyle, and Mason were let out quietly by federal agents. Their parents followed, no longer untouchable. Elijah caught Kyle's eye briefly. The boy looked away. His confidence was gone. Shame had taken its place. Outside, the steps of the courthouse had become a media storm. Cameras flashed, microphones swayed, an agent stepped up to the podium. I'm Special Agent Diana Chen with the FBI's Civil Rights Division, she said. We are opening a federal investigation into allegations of systemic harassment, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice in Oak Ridge County. She raised a hand to calm the crowd. This is about more than one boy. This is about a pattern that ends now. Reporters shouted questions. Will the students be charged? What about the drowning footage? Agent Chen was clear. Juvenile charges will proceed under federal hate crime statutes. Their parents are being charged as adults. Sentences could reach up to 20 years. Gasps spread through the crowd. One by one, agents led the parents away in handcuffs. Their designer clothes and practiced smiles could no longer protect them. No one is above the law, Agent Chen said, closing her folder. But Elijah was already turning away. He had nothing more to prove. Still, he paused. Reporters pressed forward as he raised one hand. I just want to say something. Silence fell. My grandfather always said martial arts isn't about hurting people. It's about protecting what's right, with honor. He paused. This wasn't just about me. It was about standing up when no one else would. And I'm glad we didn't back down. He stepped away from the cameras, his mother and Mr. Curtis beside him. They got into the car and drove past the courthouse, past the flashing lights, past the pain, towards something better. 3 days later, their house was nearly packed. Boxes lined the walls, marked in Denise's neat handwriting. Elijah sealed another box. His body ached, but his spirit didn't. Got another scholarship offer, Denise called from the kitchen, waving an envelope with tears in her eyes. Elijah smiled. For the first time in a long time, it felt like they were heading somewhere safe, somewhere they belonged. Let me know if you want an intro script for YouTube, a trailer voiceover, or even the next story in the series, like Elijah giving a TED Talk, joining a civil rights internship, or helping others who went through similar things. This one's from the Civil Rights Defense Fund, Denise said, holding up the envelope. Full ride, any college you choose. Elijah smiled, thinking of Mr. Curtis and all the calls he must have made, the connections he pulled. That was the 4th scholarship this week, and there was more. The housing assistance came through too, Denise added. A 3-bedroom apartment in Riverside Heights. Safe, quiet, new schools. A new start. She touched the chipped kitchen counter where she used to stretch meals for 2 on a single paycheck. It's more than I ever dreamed we'd have. A knock at the door. Mr. Curtis walked in, holding a box of donuts. Moving days, hungry work. Denise laughed, but her eyes were soft. They sat around the kitchen table, the last breakfast in a house that had seen too much pain. And now, peace. But before we go, Mr. Curtis said, we need to talk about tonight. Elijah looked up. What's tonight? The town council. They're holding a ceremony at the pool. They want to honor you. Elijah paused. We leave tomorrow. Maybe it's better to just go quietly. Mr. Curtis leaned forward. This isn't just about you anymore, son. It's about what comes next, for everyone else. Denise nodded. Sometimes healing needs a witness. The moving truck came on time. Paid for by a community fund started by parents, teachers, neighbors, some who had once looked away, now doing what they could to make it right. People dropped by with food, letters, hugs, even misses. Chen from the corner store brought dumplings and tears. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner, she whispered. That night, the parking lot at Oakage Pool overflowed. The sun was setting, and people held candles, even though it wasn't dark yet. By the deep end, where it had all happened, a podium had been set. Mayor Thompson stepped up. We're here tonight because of a young man who showed us what courage really means. Elijah James stood up, not just for himself, but for this whole town. She gestured toward the pool wall. A bronze plaque, newly mounted. This is not just about what happened. It's a promise that Oakage will no longer ignore injustice. Not in our schools, not in our police department, not anywhere. The crowd parted. Elijah stepped forward with his mother and Mr. Curtis. The mayor held out a certificate. Elijah, this is the first Oakage Medal of Courage. For standing up when it would have been easier to walk away? Applause rippled like the pool's surface behind him. Elijah accepted the medal, its weight grounding him. He looked at the crowd, students who had filmed the truth, teachers who had found their voices, neighbors who were learning, trying. Thank you, Elijah said. But courage isn't just about fighting back. It's about fighting forward for something better. He turned to Mr. Curtis. My grandfather taught me that martial arts is about protecting others. That's why I want to become an instructor one day, so no kid ever has to feel helpless again. More applause, louder this time. Agent Chen nodded from the back. Even the mayor wiped away a tear. As the sun dropped low, Elijah stood at the edge of the pool. The same spot where fear once dragged him down now shimmered with purpose. Your grandfather would be proud, Mr. Curtis whispered. Elijah touched the metal. The future waited. A new home, new roads, but tonight belonged to truth, to a boy who stood up and changed everything. If this story moved you, please like the video and subscribe. Your support helps bring more powerful stories like this to light. And while you're here, I've picked 2 more stories I think you'll love. Click one now and keep watching. We'll see you in the next chapter. Let me know if you want this as a voiceover-ready script or if you'd like to build a thumbnail title or storyboard around this ending.